Live from Washington, this is a Your Voice, Your Future Roundtable, War on Terror. Joining our discussion tonight, U.S. Congressman Scott Perry, former FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett, former Marine Intelligence Officer, Maritalk Executive Editor Dan Verton, founder and president of the Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney, former Pentagon spokesman J.D. Gordon, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, and with the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Abdul Latif Bennett. From Capitol Hill, national correspondent Christine Frizzell, and live from Paris, France, ABC7 senior political reporter Scott Thuman.
It happened so quickly, and no one was in the state to be able to do anything because people were just sort of frozen in shock.
La France est en guerre.
France is at war.
My only interest is to end suffering and to keep the American people safe.
And that's the tough part. That's the question right now a lot of people need answered. Can the president keep us safe? And what is being done to keep the American people safe? I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This is Your Voice, Your Future, a roundtable. And our discussion tonight, obviously in light of what's taken place in Paris, is terrorism. We'll be live here on the Hill. We have our correspondents in Paris as well. And we're going to talk to folks here in the studio, a roundtable discussion about what is being done to prevent what has happened in Paris from happening here. And just days after the attack that took place in Paris, already threats about the United States. The start of the weekend overseas when terrorists attacked the financial district and restaurants and a concert hall, soccer stadium, 130 people killed, has become now a turning point in this war on terror. The Eiffel Tower glows the colors of the French flag. The lights turned back on after it remained dark since Friday's attacks. The Friday the 13th attacks have left this country in mourning. Memorials going up all over the city. 129 people killed, 352 wounded, 99 of those in very serious condition. So many asking, how could this happen again? Because 11 months ago, the Charlie Hebdo shooting, a magazine that printed a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. The result? Gunmen stormed the magazine headquarters, killing 11 and wounding 11 others. President Obama initially described ISIS as the junior varsity. And on the morning of the Paris attacks, he said ISIS was contained.
From the start, our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them.
But the trail of death and destruction contradicts that. 2 weeks ago, ISIS claimed responsibility for the downing of a Russian passenger jet over Sinai, killing all 224 people on board. ISIS has claimed responsibility for all of these recent attacks. 4 days ago, a pair of suicide bombings in Beirut, killing 43, wounding 239 others. In June, a gunman kills at least 38 tourists at a beachfront hotel in Tunisia, while a bomb kills 27 people at a mosque in Kuwait. February, ISIS releases video of them burning a Jordanian pilot alive while trapped in a cage. And just last year, the gruesome videos of an ISIS spokesman beheading American journalists James Foley and Stephen Sotloff and British worker David Haines. ISIS currently operates in areas that they have taken control of in Iraq and Syria. From all accounts, they continue to expand and grow, and not just in the region. And even before France can bury their dead, ISIS is now making new threats, and this time they say they will be targeting Washington, D.C. Here is the latest. An ISIS affiliate put out a video just today threatening to attack any nation supporting airstrikes against them in the Middle East, specifically mentioning the States and Washington, D.C. Sunday night, French military jets targeted the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa, Syria, in an effort to fight back. And then this morning, Paris begins its attempt to return to normal, or what will be the new normal for Paris. Under heavy guard, museums and the Eiffel Tower reopening to tourists. They're now back out in the City of Lights. Residents are heading back to work, but a manhunt, an all-out manhunt, continues. And in Belgium, several raids in hopes of finding accomplices. One suspected connected to this attack is on the run. And the man believed to have concocted this whole plan is also free. Last known to have been living, or at least staying, in Greece. Now, in a moment, we will discuss the next stage in the war on terror with our panel here. But right now, we are going to go live to Paris and ABC 7 senior political reporter Scott Thuman. And Scott, this has been a very difficult time in a city that really has seen not this kind of scale attack in some time, but they got a taste of it back in January with the Charlie Hebdo attack.
Yeah, you're right, Jonathan, but on this level, not since World War II. It is remarkable in so many unfortunate ways, and it's interesting because today, as we were at the Bataclan, which is, of course, where the concert was underway when they were attacked, and then at the Place de la République, which has become kind of the central gathering point here in Paris. So many people were telling us not only were they sad, were they upset, were they devastated, understandably and expectedly by what happened, but more so it was kind of this overwhelming fear. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. They all seem to think that something else is impending, especially because of the recent attacks by French and U.S. warplanes flying into Syria almost immediately after ISIL took credit for this. They worry that now there will be an eventual backlash a second time around.
What is the sentiment from the folks in Paris? Because I know after the Charlie Hebdo attack, the city, thousands of people had come together. They filled so many squares there, and they were all saying, "We are Charlie." Now, a scale of an attack like this, is there anger mixed in with the pain that they're going through? And are they asking for changes now?
You know, I didn't hear the voices as loud as we hear back in the U.S. for some of the changes. It's a different culture here, as you know, and so the questions that I was asking people were kind of twofold. One, are you glad that there's more military intervention? Do you think there needs to be even more than what we've seen just in the past 36 hours as far as setting a tone? And people were very mixed on that reaction because they believe that, yes, there needs to be stronger military might, but to what degree? They say it can't solve the problems. You have to be proactive. You have to get to the root of them. It's got to be a lot more organic than that. And then secondly, I was asking them about the refugee issue, and do you believe that that means you need to start looking a little more closely at what kind of, and I use the word loosely here, but vetting process for allowing Syrian refugees into the country. And that's another one where people are very torn. They feel like you need to greet people with open arms, you need to be accepting, but at the same time, they see this sort of attack. They don't want it to happen again, and so they're really kind of at a crossroads as what to do.
And let me ask you about the refugee situation, because you got an opportunity, and this is video we're showing right now of you visiting some of these refugee camps. Is there really a way to go through and vet the folks that are coming out of Syria? I mean, these are, you got to set the stage. These are people leaving their country with nothing but what they've got on their back. Do they have documents? Are there records? Is there any indication that we can prove that these are solid citizens that just need our support? Or is there a way to say, you know what, you were somebody who was suspected of maybe committing crimes? I mean, how do they do this?
It's such a paradox, and I think what's interesting, Jonathan, because you bring up a great point, is that you want to find out what exactly a background on someone may be and what you can legitimize. And proponents or people who are much more open about accepting refugees will say, you know, these are 99.9% good people, there's no concern. But how do you know that? When we were in Calais, which is a camp which, by the way, was raided again overnight, and in Calais there were some police raids in the town surrounding that refugee camp. When we were there, we were asking people that very question. Do you know who's in the tent next to you? Do you know that they can be trusted? And everyone said, I don't know. I don't know the guy next to me. I don't know the person beside me. It's a really, really cloudy culture there, and especially when you talk about trying to figure out where someone's from, their background, you can't necessarily call the Syrian government and say, hey, we'd like to possibly grant entrance to this person. What can we verify in their backgrounds? The infrastructure is not there in Syria. You don't just get a reply from Damascus on someone's criminal history. So these are reasons that while people were already skeptical, they were already worried, suddenly now that concern is ramped up dramatically, and it's going to either halt, alter, or differentiate exactly what the process is now. What do you let in? Who do you let in? And are you okay with this? And we're hearing a lot of backlash tonight, both here and in the United States, that will cause that entire system to be reanalyzed.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Is there a lot of pushback now going on in France? Or people saying, look, we can't deal with the problem by just letting everybody in. We have to really, I don't even know how you do it at this point, because they've already let thousands of people into the country, and they are free to roam from our understanding.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. They try, for example, in Calais once again, which is, it's perhaps one of the most let's say, critically observed because it's so close. It's the last stop to get to England. So that's why there are so many there, because they want to get into England. Now, you say, are they free to move around? Absolutely. They try and keep them sequestered to some degree, but every night, we have video of it, we would watch refugees walk away from the camp because it's not a fenced-in area. They would walk 2 hours to try and get into semi-trucks, to try and get onto boats, to try and get through the channel, even if they meant walking the entire train track system, which is very dangerous. More than 30 died in a 2-month span. But that's how desperate they are. Now, whether it's because they're trying to escape terrorism, which in most cases is probably the case, they're trying to get away from Syria and from Bashar al-Assad's regime and all of the dangers that exist. But is there also the possibility that some of them have nefarious intent and want to get to the West to commit crimes? It's absolutely a possibility. But what do you do to contain them? I mean, are you going to set up internment camps? Are you going to set up prisons? That's not the system that we're going to see.
All right, Scott Thuman coming to us live from Paris. Scott, thank you for that. Back here in Washington, small tokens of sympathy, people stopping by the French embassy to add what has become a growing memorial and a symbol of U.S. support for the healing our allies overseas. Tom Rousey's joining us live at the embassy this evening. And Tom, you were there on Friday night when people just started to show up. A lot of tears, a lot of emotion there.
Definitely, and even as we speak right here, Jonathan, we have some folks laying some candles at the scene here. We were here on Friday night when within hours of the attacks, one woman came by and laid the first flower. Well, you can see what has happened since then. Just an absolute outpouring of support from local residents, local college students. We've also seen French Americans here. We've seen French citizens here, all feeling like they had to do something from Washington, D.C. We're just outside the Georgetown neighborhood. That's where the French embassy is. This is right outside the gate. And you can see folks have left messages. They've left just countless flowers, countless stuffed animals, all wanting to show their support. Again, we actually talked to a local veteran who was in the Pentagon on 9/11 a little earlier. You notice how nicely all these flowers are arranged. Well, she spent hours rearranging them because people had literally run out of room to put things. So she rearranged everything, put the candles in front here, and then put the flowers in back, and that's why it looks as organized as it does right here. But folks continue, as they have for 72 hours now, to put things here to show their support for the French people. Back to you, Jonathan.
All right, Tom, thanks very much. Now let's get to our panel. There's a lot to talk about tonight about what has happened in Paris and how it relates to us here in the United States. I'm joined this evening with J.D. Gordon. He's the former spokesperson for the Pentagon. We appreciate you being here. Also the outreach coordinator for Ahmadiyya Muslim community, Abdul Latif Bennett. We thank you for being here as well. And also the Center for Security Policy founder and president, Frank Gaffney. To all of you, I thank you for being here. Obviously a lot to talk about. Let's start with you, J.D. So here we have the situation overseas. The president of the G20 summit comes out today and says, listen, let's not change our policy, let's not change our course. Everything seems to be working, and this will be a win solution. Is he right?
I don't think so. I think that we have the greatest danger facing the United States since fascism and communism in the last century. I think we're facing a formidable enemy, radical Islam. I think that there's a battle that's been going on within the Middle East for who's going to control the radical Sunnis in Saudi Arabia or the radical Shia in Iran. They've been battling each other for control of the heart and soul of Islam, domination of the Middle East, and they want to throw us out of the Middle East and wipe Israel off the map. The radicals do. So I think that we have to see it for what it is, and I think we have to get rid of these terms like Islamophobia. I think political correctness ought to be our survival, not worrying about offending people.
Same question to you. You think the president was making it very clear, listen, what has happened in Paris is horrible, but it doesn't change anything. Is he right, wrong? What's the policy? Does it make sense?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we strongly condemn this violence. We see it as an act against humanity, and we condemn radicalism and terrorism wherever we find it. But nonetheless, I heard the president's comments, and he seems to think that if he stays the course and that boots on the ground will not solve the problem. As people of peace, we believe that war in of itself also always begets more problems. And we are mounting what's like a peace offensive. And so we think that that the way to peace is to pursue it with a definitive course. And that's what we offer in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
In fairness, and my job as moderator here is also play devil's advocate. You know, you say war begets war, but that's not necessarily the case. You know, we were having terrorist attacks being carried out against Americans long before, you know, we were involved militarily overseas.
Yes, I know, but if we listen to what they are asking for, basically they're looking for two things. One, they don't like our presence in the region. And then secondly, they're hanging their actions on a false notion of establishing a caliphate. We in the Ahmadiyya community have established one over 100 years ago. And so every argument that they make to justify their actions, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has the rebuttal to it. And our peace offensive actually undermines everything that they say that they stand for, because they're not representing true Islam.
Frank, same question to you. You heard the speech this morning by the President May of the G20. Here he is saying, you know, there is going to be no diversion from our policy. We're staying the course. Is that a smart play?
If you like what's happened so far, continuing the present policy is going to suit you, I guess, just fine. I don't think most of us feel very comfortable with the results to date. And that's primarily because I think most Americans have enough common sense to look at what we're up against and say, it actually is about jihad.
Live from our Capitol Hill Bureau is our national correspondent, Christine Frizzau. And Christine, you know, you talked with a lot of folks today, and all of them agree that something has to be done. This something has to come from them, I would imagine.
Absolutely. You can tell there is a new sense of urgency here in Washington and definitely on Capitol Hill. But what that actually means, well, you're going to have some different interpretations depending on who you speak to. Some lawmakers say, you know what, we need to stay the course. We're on the right path. We just need to keep doing what we're doing. And other lawmakers I spoke to saying we need some major changes to take place.
It's been just 3 days since the terrorist attacks in Paris. But it feels like a new era in Washington, with calls for war ringing loud and clear.
We need boots on the ground, and we need to have a strategy.
Congress should declare war against ISIS.
It's a sharp divide from what we heard from President Obama, who is still strongly opposed to boots on the ground in Syria.
It is not just my view, but the view of my closest military and civilian advisors that would be a mistake.
Senator Ben Cardin, the Democratic leader of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is standing by the president.
As King Abdullah of Jordan has said, this is a fight that the Muslims must make on their own. And if it becomes a Western fight, it'll be counterproductive to a long-term solution.
Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz is among those concerned about the current security situation when it comes to those who cross U.S. borders. He's drafting new legislation which would give Congress the power to approve the number of refugees entering the United States, a number currently decided by the president.
He's in, I think, denial. I mean, it was the very day of the Paris attack, he thought that ISIS was contained. Nobody believed that.
So again, in the coming days, we do expect to hear several lawmakers make proposals for what they want to do, both domestically and on an international scale. Also, once again, we expect the debate to reemerge over just how much militarily this country should be involved. All of that we do expect to hear in the days and weeks ahead. Live in Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau. Back to you.
All right, Christine, thanks for that. And part of the global war on terror is analyzing attacks like what happened in France so that we can mitigate or try to mitigate the threats moving forward. In our newsroom tonight is Meritalk executive editor Dan Verton, a former Marine intelligence officer. And Dan, first, you know, let's discuss let's do the intelligence part of this first. I asked earlier, was this a breakdown in intelligence, or have they just figured out a way to kind of morph or evolve away from being detected?
Well, I think it was actually a little bit of both. You had a situation where individuals were on the radar screen of French intelligence services who were not being tracked or monitored. You also have a situation here where the terrorists, the bad guys, are starting to learn and evolve their tactics and procedures. If you look at this event, particularly in Paris, it harkens back to the attacks that happened in Mumbai. Almost a casebook study in the Mumbai attacks.
What's interesting about this, too, is, and I was talking to somebody about this, is we're not against a standing army. If that was the case, then this would be really a short kind of exchange. You know, this is 9/11 was 19 people involved in that. It crippled our economy, and they used 4 of our own planes to get the job done. In Paris, you're looking at 8 or 7 different attackers, maybe 10, and look what it's done to that country and the psyche of that country. It doesn't take very many people to coordinate an attack like this.
No, but if you look back, let's just take the Mumbai example, because I think it really provides us the most insight into what happened in Paris. You had a coordinated attack by 10 attackers who actually were on a ship for 500 miles using a handheld GPS to land in Mumbai. They fanned out across multiple targets. That attack was a year in the planning phase. They actually had an operative rent a home in the center of Mumbai and spent a year surveilling the targets and putting together detailed targeting packages. I have a sense that this particular attack in Paris followed the same operational construct. It was probably planned in Syria, the logistics came together in Belgium, and it was carried out in Paris.
Dan, let's talk about the intelligence aspect of all of this again, because in the G20 today, President Obama said that the French authorities will be in charge, and in connection with our intelligence, it'll be a mutual sharing opportunity for everybody, free-flowing. Is that really going to help in this case?
I think it will, but it's very puzzling how the French missed some of this. The French Signals Intelligence Service is among the best in the world. So I think there are a lot of questions here in terms of how some of these pieces of the puzzle did not come together sooner.
Joining us live now on Capitol Hill is Representative Scott Perry, a combat veteran who flew dozens of missions in Iraq. And Mr. Perry, we appreciate you joining us this evening. And I guess the first reaction is, what was the reaction on the Hill from lawmakers in general?
Well, I think we're all very concerned, and you're trying to figure out what is your place. What can Congress do? Most of these policies are executed by the president, by the executive branch, and quite honestly, whether we do anything or not, if he wants to just countervail that, there's not much we can do about that. But I think it's important that we have the discussion, that the American people are involved in the narrative here. You know, the president goes out and says that we've contained ISIL. Well, you know, from all, I guess, measurable indicators, they're of course in Iraq and Syria, they're in Yemen, they're in North Africa, and obviously they're in France. So to say that that there's a strategy, first of all, I don't have any idea what the strategy is. I don't know if any of America or any of the world knows what the strategy is. And to say that they're contained is obviously just foolhardy. And so I think it's important that we all stay engaged in the conversation, and Congress as a part of that. I think we are going to move forward with policy. Whether the president agrees or not is going to be the discussion and the issue, and how the American people feel about his position versus their elected representatives in Congress is going to be the issue.
Let me ask you this. What is our foreign policy in dealing with ISIS and other terrorist groups? Do you know?
I have no idea. I mean, we don't call it radical Islam. We don't call it radical jihad. We just call it simply terrorism. And we, of course, include domestic terrorism by, you know, somebody in a neo-Nazi group in America with these folks, when clearly the issue and the concern of the day is with these folks. Radical Islam is alive and well. So you can't even identify the enemy. You go out and tell the American people that you have it contained when obviously it's not, and that you tell them that the strategy is working, yet you never describe the strategy. I have no idea what it is, and I don't think anybody knows what it is, including the executive branch.
We should all know what it is, given the fact that we have so many examples of horrendous things that have been done, not only on our soil, but overseas. You got Fort Hood, and they were hemming and hawing about what exactly was that, workplace violence or domestic terrorism. It just seems to me, if there was some sort of set policy that really defined what it is we're up against, who our enemy is, that's got to be the first objective in defining a way to fix it or to solve the problem.
It seems like the administration is completely detached from reality, and they feel like if they just keep saying we have a strategy enough time, that the American people and the world will believe it. This is what I know. ISIS or ISIL said that they were going to infiltrate the refugee population and then coordinate attacks in Europe. They've already done that. Okay, they just did that. That's their strategy. That's their tactic. Now, just recently, within the last 2 days, they've talked about doing the same thing in America. It's important that Americans understand that and wake up. And it's really important that the executive branch and policymakers heed those warnings and be proactive to do something about it. And that's my concern, that the executive branch just continues to live in some alternate reality.
So it would be foolhardy to underestimate who our enemy is here. Clearly, they are outthinking us on a number of different levels. So with that said, with the refugees that are coming, and clearly there are a lot of people that need refuge. These are people who have been facing terrorism day in and day out, and they need a helping hand. And obviously, we've been a very generous nation. Is there concern about how we go about letting these folks in our borders?
Well, there's certainly concern on my part, and I think many of my constituents and many Americans' part, when we know for certain, no matter what the executive branch says, we know for certain that they're not being adequately vetted. How do you vet people with no paper trail, with no history whatsoever, and also no way of finding it out? What are we going to do? Call Bashir Assad up, call his, some public service agency in Syria and say, hey, what do you know about this family or this individual? Nobody's there to answer the phone. There is no vetting. This is all political doublespeak just to bring people in. We want to be humanitarian, but we also know this. We're concerned about these people. We're especially concerned about women and infants and children that are caught in the crossfire here. But we also know on the best case scenario, it takes 18 to 24 months to vet these people in the best case scenario. What is it now, and how can we ever believe that tens and thousands of these people are coming in being properly vetted into our country? And what are the national security implications? What are the consequences of those foolhardy decisions and those half-truths? We know them inherently.
In the last few seconds we have with you, Representative, is the going forward call for you, listen, close the borders, don't let anybody in until we get an opportunity to see who it is we're bringing in?
We absolutely. Look, the first indication and the first part of our job is to do what's right for America first, right? We want to be humanitarian. Our heart goes out to these people, but we must be concerned about ourselves first in our country. It is our duty. It's the oath we all took. So whatever works to make sure that we're doing it right has to be done. And if that's what needs to be done, that absolutely has to be on the table.
The refugee question, we were talking about it earlier. Let them in or no?
I say no. I say no because you can't guarantee that they're not going to turn out to be terrorists. And even if they come over as children like the Sarnia brothers, it's very easy to get radicalized if you have influential clerics from Mecca to Tehran and even here and in Europe saying you should kill infidels, you should enslave women and girls, that's okay, you're going to be martyred and have 72 virgins. As long as they're saying that type of nonsense, we're never going to be safe.
Let them in or no?
Let them in, let them in.
All of them.
We have an obligation, an obligation to humanity. In fact, we have an organization called Humanity First, where we provide assistance throughout the world with no strings attached to Muslims, Christians, or whoever. And this is an opportunity that is coming to our doorstep. And we believe it holds many blessings for those who provide help.
An opportunity for?
To serve humanity. And these people are suffering, so we believe that we should receive them.
Frank, let them in or no?
Look, if what you're talking about are primarily fighting age young men, you cannot vet their backgrounds. And by the way, it's not just from Syria. You've got them coming in from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Eritrea, from other parts of the Muslim world. I think you're insane, as Senator Cruz said, not to insist that you don't let them in until you've been able actually to vet them. And it's national security fraud on the part of the president and other spokesmen for the administration to say they can do it now.
But let me be devil's advocate for a second. I mean, our borders are pretty porous, as we all know. So why should we worry about refugees coming in when if they really wanted to get in here, if they wanted to send up some cells that they could activate, why they could just go across the Mexican border?
You have to do both, frankly. The ones that we're letting in under the refugee program are actually coming in legally and getting, as the Sarnaev boys did, the full benefits of our society. Among other things, the ability to come and go as they please. What we need to do with respect to those who are here illegally, those who are here building the jihadist infrastructure, is to roll them up.
Right. Abdul, 30 seconds. Let me just finish with you. Your last thoughts on this.
Well, I think that what we're witnessing is an opportunity for the United States to take the high road. If we accept the refugees in, and we're doing what we've tried to do in many instances in terms of winning hearts and minds, but the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we're going to do our part throughout the world, as we are in 207 countries, to spread the message of peace and to explain what true Islam is. and that's how we fight radical Islam.
All right, I want to
His sect is being targeted by the kinds of guys he's talking about letting in.
Understood. This is not this is Muslim against Muslim in a lot of these cases, which we have seen. You know, Islam is kind of fractured when it comes to certain groups. So
Indeed.
I want to thank all of you. Thank you, all of our guests, for joining us, and also thank Scott Thuman, his tireless reporting overseas. This has been a News Channel 8 ABC 7 special, Your Voice, Your Future Roundtable, the War on Terror. We're going to leave you now with a look at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C., a growing memorial. Good night.